Hey everybody, it's the Week in the Tackle podcast, the podcast where we look back at the previous week in football and or soccer, or also the things we've done physically together, and talk about the things that we thought were interesting. I'm Tom Rennie, alongside me is MLS legend, and we can all agree, the mayor of Columbus, it's Brian Dunny Dunseth. Hi Dunny, you all right?
Yeah, I'm great. I'm actually wondering now that we're sitting down together why we didn't do this together while we were in Tim Horsey's room.
Why we didn't do it?
Yeah.
Because we did like 1,000 shows. And
true.
after we did the Wednesday show in Ohio, following the Tuesday night when I got to bed at like 4 a.m. and we got up at 8 a.m. to do a live 3-hour program, I went to bed for 6 hours. I couldn't even imagine. You were like, oh, let's do the podcast now.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
No,
I mean, my work
some of us
ethic
had to work.
is below yours. Everyone's work ethic is below yours. Okay.
No. Hey, by the way, Horsey, we can hear you furiously typing in the background.
Learn to turn your mic off, bud.
Yeah. Come on, Boxcar, lock it up over there.
So look, we're back with a Week in the Tackle. We didn't do one last week when we were in Columbus, Ohio, because it was so busy and so much fun. We just didn't have the time.
And you needed to sleep. Yeah.
And I did need to sleep. I desperately needed to sleep after 4 days of mayhem. So I want to talk about that a bit on today's program and let people know what it was like. I want to talk about the Ohio State University, which was just so awesome. I could probably do a whole show on just how mind-boggling that whole thing was. I would like to talk to you a bit about Olympic football and also American tours. Lots of teams on American tours right now, but no one seems to have told spectators. So we'll get into all that. But Ohio, so we were together for MLS All-Star 2024, our second All-Star that we've worked on together. You've, of course, worked on loads. And it was a brilliant event, a brilliant few days in Columbus, Ohio. Great to go to Lower.com Field, which is the home of my MLS team, Columbus Crew, of course, a team you played for at the old stadium. But Dunny, let's start by talking about the Ohio State University. We had a conversation on this show maybe a couple of weeks ago saying, oh, send us places we can go. I wanted to go to a batting cage. We didn't just get to go to a batting cage where Joe Public gets to go. We got to go to one of the most incredible colleges, I would say universities in the world, certainly in America. And we got on a walking tour where we got to see the basketball facilities, the netball facilities, the lacrosse facilities, the baseball facilities, the American kind of football facilities. I mean, you've experienced that a bit. I'd never seen anything like it. That was absolutely incredible for me. Tell people a bit about what we went through.
Yeah, so we ended up going over to the Ohio State University campus, and we had to explain to you why they call it the Ohio State University instead of Ohio State University. And then once we started walking around, the immediacy of what was happening, and because it's summer, it's camps. So you had lacrosse camp going on, you had women's volleyball camp going on. Then we jumped upstairs and we saw the wrestling facility. That's where you and I got to throw a football back and forth. I almost hit you square in the face and broke your glasses because the catching became a little bit suspect, as well as you thinking I was throwing it too hard when I was just throwing you a spiral.
That ball was spiraling into my hands. I have, if you're watching on YouTube, a broken finger, which I broke at a party. I can't tell you why. I want to keep my career, but I broke this finger and you threw it at me and I felt agonizing pain for like 10 minutes.
And you go, why are you throwing it so hard? I go, I'm just throwing it to you. And you're like, no, you're really. So we taught you how to create the spiral. We taught you how to use the threading and where exactly to put your hand. And you were a little bit too forward. Then we put you a little bit back and you were throwing it pretty well. And then I kind of followed through with a throw. And as you caught it, you're like, how do you throw it that hard? And so we were teaching you all of that. Then we went over to the basketball arena. We tried to go see Brian Mazanoff, my former teammate at the Columbus Crew, who's the head coach of the men's soccer program, but he was on vacation. So I got to write a little love note for him at his desk. But I think once we got into the kind of like second phase where it was like the workout rooms and the refill stations, and you got to see from the training room, your mind was blown because we were just going from like one facility to another facility. We hadn't even got over to the basketball facility yet, much less the football stadium at the Horseshoe. I think it's then when you kind of saw the size and listening to them verbalize Dan, who was walking us around, not only the Olympians, but the college
Yeah.
athletes, and then seeing kind of the workout rooms, just one workout room. I think that's where you're like, oh my God. And then we got to the basketball arena, and you getting like the Ohio State men's basketball team, the Ohio State University men's basketball team coming over while you were kind of like shooting, they're walking in, you see just the gargantuan size of them. And then to see kind of the wall of success of NBA
Mm.
players that have come over. And then once we're inside the arena, them explaining to you how they basically they flip the switch, they freeze the floor, they add the water, and then that's ice stays on for the
That was
entirety
wild.
of the
And how
hockey
about
season.
when, can I just say,
Yeah.
so Jake was talking to us, who runs the men's basketball team there, and he was telling me and you about how they do this amazing thing where they do like ice hockey at midday and then like a basketball match at 8 p.m.
Mhm.
And he was explaining it to me. Now, then I did something for camera about how they did it. Now, I think I crushed it.
Nope.
But immediately, you and the two guys from Ohio State and Tim and Pete and everyone else were like, nothing you said made any sense.
Yeah.
We're all dumber for having heard it. I thought I
Yep.
completely nailed it. And
Yep.
then doing the retake, I just skipped the details because
Yeah.
it's so, for a normal person's brain
Yeah.
to try and compute all this stuff, none of it made any sense to me. And even trying to understand it, then trying to regurgitate it, I couldn't quite explain it because, like, what was really interesting, and I think a couple of days reflection on this is I've been thinking about it a lot because I know people that have gone through like the system to become professional athletes, professional footballers, and other sports, and the pathway that all these guys have. Like we spoke to a young guy who was like 19, 20 on the baseball team, and like even if they aren't going to be professional, they can see a pathway to it. They can see a pathway now. They get paid as kind of college athletes to make a decent
Yeah.
living out of it before go on to do something else, which of course is
NIL money. Yeah.
well, yeah, that's true. Nice to have some money. That helps. It's a weird to live in a capitalist country and the athletes don't make any money. So I suppose it's better now, but I don't know. Let's not get too far into that. But like, it feels like more of a mess here. It's messier and scruffier, and I don't know if it's you have to have more luck. I don't know if that's the
Mm.
right word. But everyone there was such a lovely pathway to keep on going. Very tough to qualify for it. I'm
Yeah.
not saying
Yeah.
it's easy, but
Yeah.
you can see it. You can see the narrowing pathway to where you would make it as a professional. Whereas here, it sort of feels like throw it up in the air and see what happens.
Well, yeah, and Dan and Gary were the two SIDs that walked us around, and Jake is the head coach of the Ohio State University men's basketball team that we're having the conversation. And yeah, by the way, going back to the arena, where you were incorrect, you're saying that they basically like melt the ice, and I was like, no, the ice is down, and then they have like a layer that protects the ice, and then they put the basketball court on top of the ice, on top of that layer. So it just,
Still don't get that.
facts, just
Still don't
facts.
understand.
No, but to your point, here in the States, once you have these kids that are virtual, the best are usually multi-sport athletes that then go into one singular sport. And then as that 1% of high school then goes to college, you're talking about the 1% of the 1% that then
Mm.
are a part of these universities that are as massive as the Ohio State University. But then to even think about being an Olympian or to think about being a pro, you're then that 1% of that 1% of that 1%. And so it just gets steeper and steeper and tighter and tighter. And so by the time we got through the arena, we headed over to the baseball facility. We met Harrison Moore, who was incredible with us. And
Top guy.
when we turned the corner, and at that point, Dan was like, we were kind of like not over it, but we were kind of like,
Yeah.
okay, we've seen it. Let's head to the football stadium. Like, oh, we
I
were going to
mean,
go to
they were
we were going to
wildly
baseball.
generous. We'd done like 3 hours. I
Yeah,
thought
and
we'd be there for like an hour.
yeah, so we get to the baseball facility and we're in the baseball stadium. And then you've never seen this, I've seen this. You kind of have the warm-up batting cages or the BP, the batting practice area. And all of a sudden we got there and there's 3 lanes. And I was like, the baseball gloves were out and the bats were out. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, we really get to do this. And it was like it was a progression of like baseball tee to underhand slow pitch to then getting in front of the pitching machine, which they started at 60 and we ended at 90 and we thought we were done. And then they're like, Harrison's like, no, let's go take BP on the field. And at that point, I was just like, I mean,
Yeah.
I hadn't swung a bat in a batting cage 20 plus years.
Yeah.
So to all of a sudden go through that, like it was incredible. And then to see you kind of like start your, like this is a class for you, right? This is like a master's degree of a batting cage class for you. And starting with more of like a cricket stance and then moving your way up and kind of like it was rad to kind of like see it through your eyes, me to get to do it. But then, and by the way, our esteemed leader over at SiriusXM, Pete Corey, was
Oh
like,
yeah.
"Oh,
Fucking
bro,
blagger. What
bro,
a blagger. Sorry, Tim.
95 miles an hour. I got this, bro." And then we got there and he's like, "I might have inflated what I can probably do
Yeah.
here," because he got nervous real quick.
I had a great video of Pete where he was like, he hit one and he suddenly started really feeling himself and was
Yeah,
like swinging
swinging.
the bat behind
Yeah,
him and getting
yeah.
ready. And the next one shanked it completely. It was amazing. I loved the base. I knew I'd love the baseball. I it really felt like I was going to enjoy it. I didn't think we were going to get that sort of kind of exposure to it and the
Hmm.
kind of coaching and all that sort of stuff. But I did. All this stuff is on at SiriusXMFC. Find it on social media, Instagram, and
You did well,
the
kid.
other
I was
one.
proud of you. I was
Yeah.
proud. I didn't have high expectations, and it had nothing to do with like your athleticism or
Mm.
my perceived lack of
The
athleticism. It was more about the Americana athleticism that's
Yeah.
different. The hand-eye coordination, your cricket ability actually came in very handy with
Yeah.
how quickly you adapted. And spoiler alert, the fact that you put a bat on a ball that was pitched 90 miles an hour
So
at us.
fast.
And
So
by the way,
fast.
looking back, my wife's like, "Where's your helmets?" And I was like,
Yes. I got like 20 messages saying you had a helmet on, right?
"No,
Can we not see the padding on the front? I was like, no,
no
no.
helmet, just the noggin."
Would have died. Like you would have died. It was way fast. It was brilliant.
Remember when I fouled one off of my foot and I was like squealing in pain. And then I finally like had one good 90-mile-an-hour hit and my wrist, I had just a burner, like wrist
Yeah.
burner immediately, a stinger. My wrist still hurts. And then I still got these, like you can see you were so selfish with the
Yes.
gloves and you can
Yeah.
barely see I'm starting to heal for where I got the blisters on my hands.
So sore. So good. Thanks to all the guys that helped us out. I think we made some really good content, which you can find on at SiriusXMFC on all the good social medias and great work from Tim and Pete as well, putting it all together. We then did the All-Star, of course, at lower.com field, the skills challenge, which was I actually thought last year's was better in,
Hmm.
maybe it was the first time
It
I'd
was the
seen it, but
Arsenal guys. I think it was because they were Arsenal players.
yeah,
It was
the Arsenal guys
Premier
drew you
League.
in.
It
The
was more
Ramsdale
familiar
bit
for
of
you.
it.
Yeah.
The goalie wars last year was better. This year, I think I might have won goalie wars. They all seem crap. Like, you got to at some point learn how to shoot, boys.
They weren't crap, but go on.
The guy won 1-0 and 1-0 because the other
Yeah.
guy literally couldn't hit the target. He didn't make a save to win
Yeah.
1-0 and 1-0 because he was a
Yeah.
giant man. You'll tell us his name. I forget. But the game itself was really good. A much more competitive game than it was last year. Again, MLS got beaten. But I love being at the stadium, and one of the great elements for me, at least, is that because all the work that I do is not in England, like some bits are, but I do a lot of low level stuff in England, guest appearances or cover or whatever. Whereas the shows we do in America, we have a decent amount of listeners, which always sort of freaks me out.
Yeah.
And we had a
You got
great
recognized.
I did get recognized a few times, which
Yeah.
was really cool, like super cool. And I walked around. What the great bit for me, we had our listener event. It was great to chat to people who kind of came to meet us in the bar for a few drinks on the Monday or the Tuesday night. But I walked around the ground while you guys were doing the hard yards of the commentary of All-Star. And I really got to see lower.com field in action, which maybe even you haven't, because when you go, you kind of work there. And because you're
Yeah.
working, it's not the same sort of thing. But during the game, I went up in the terracing bit where the kind of Nordeca fans are. And I chatted to a few fans. When Cucho scored the goal for All-Star, you can actually see me on the coverage on the top of the stairs behind the goal because I just arrived at that point.
Really? Okay.
So I'm in it. So I've appeared now on Apple the same times as Tim has and his giant head at MLS
Yeah.
Cup, but of course
Yeah.
less than you. So I'm there sort of celebrating the goal. I then spent a few minutes singing with some big geezer, "Hey, Cucho." Ooh. Like the Cucho song in the
Yeah.
Nordeca bit. I chatted to a nice family on the kind of back row who were like going to their first ever game, taking their two daughters who were like 6 and 8, that sort of age. But then just walking around, like people were saying, "Hey, Tom Rennie, right? What are you doing here?" And
Yeah.
the other reason they recognized me is I was wearing a shirt with Rennie on the back. But
Literally.
it was dead giveaway,
Rennie.
literally a dead giveaway. Did
Yeah.
pay for it.
Full kit wanker.
Yeah, I mean a proper full-on wanker. Yeah. If they want to send me the shorts next year, I'll wear them.
Yeah. By the way,
that-
you are impressive. We usually call people like you over here Johnny Free, because sorry, Tim, because you are always politicking for some free shit.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Hey, well, I got us some free shit, didn't I? Sorry, Tim. We all got
No,
some.
no. And I apologize because I can't remember the name right now of the guys that we hung out with. They gave us stuff and
Yes.
gave you half the stuff, gave me half the stuff. It was the exact same stuff. You just thought because I made Tim Horsey carry it back to the hotel that it was your stuff to give to
Yeah.
me. No,
Yeah.
we got the same stuff, Rennie, just to be clear.
And we to be fair as well, we did give some of the stuff to Tim who puts this show together, and
It was all this, it was all the free that we didn't want.
the shit I didn't want, Tim now has. It's going to look great. He's going to sleep in those t-shirts for a long time.
Yeah.
But give us a quick view on the game because Crew a couple of days later beating Aston Villa. You got All-Star on the Wednesday. You had a league game on the Saturday before. They then go into Leagues Cup a few days later. 3 competitions across 4 games in the space of 10 days. Positives out of it all, do you think?
Yeah, no, listen, I think it's a celebration. As much as we talk about the competition, obviously Liga MX better on the day. They scored. The MLS All-Stars had multiple goal scoring opportunities as well. Game probably should have ended like 5 or 6-6, if not for some great goalkeeping, some great defensive stops from the Liga MX side. But at the end of the day, there's a competitive nature, and it kind of ties into, and wherever you fall in line with this, don't at me, I don't care. The idea of the Leagues Cup and what the creativity has been and the connectivity, the synergy between Liga MX and Major League Soccer is they recognize the value and partnership with one another. So yeah, all of it. The other part of this, and they smashed Aston Villa, which is, oh, we're in preseason. It's hot. That's why we lost. Come on, you got smashed.
Why are they being managed by RuPaul?
Yeah, spot the line. Anyways,
all your voices are a kind of amalgamation of Bruce Arena, Brendan Rodgers, and RuPaul.
There you go.
Bruce Arena, it trickles into all of your impressions.
No, but just because when I go, what happened? That's when you always think it's Bruce.
Because you raise the eyebrow. You raise the eyebrow. They go like sashay away.
Carlo. The one, but you know what? It was fun because I got to see, because Pete Corey doesn't read his emails. No. I got to see the moment that you walked into lower.com field and I stood next to you.
Awesome.
Kind of like last year when we saw Declan Rice for the very first time in an Arsenal kit. I got to see you see lower.com field for the very
first time. It's such a brilliant stadium. It's such
gorgeous,
a brilliant
right?
Venue. And really well put together.
It's all the nuances, the little bits that make it so spectacular. Like, it's an unbelievable stadium, but for you to see how it's branded and the color schemes and the black and gold and how updated like 2024 it feels like and then listening to you kind of compare and contrast the training facility and seeing the training facility and the grass and the turf and how that's all built on the outside of historic Crew Stadium. So for me, having played for the club, I have my own kind of feelings and thoughts and memories, but then to see it through your eyes and get to see you shake the hand of Wilfried Nancy and
that was cool.
And you get to listen to him firsthand and see such a genuine human being and the words that he uses. And then when I asked him kind of about the U.S. men's national team and you kind of like being a part of that and seeing all that, it was cool for me to kind of see your experience firsthand of what it's like for the team that you support. Yeah. But now being, boots on the ground and kind of the relationship. And I think what was cool was you get to see my relationship with the club and for the fans and how much like I still have that connectivity. And then for you to kind of like be recognized and see it, just love fest. Just been a Rennie love fest today. What the is happening? Sorry, Tim.
The scene at the start of the movie Kingpin where Woody Harrelson walks into the bowling alley and he's saying hello to everyone. Hey, lady in the red hat. Yo, what's going on, buddy? And like takes a slice of someone's pizza and eats it and then like bowls a perfect game. That's what it's like being with Dunny in Columbus, Ohio. Like we couldn't walk from like bus stop to bus stop. We couldn't get up the road. We couldn't walk around the stadium. We couldn't get to training. We couldn't get anywhere. Like literally people across the street are going like, done, Seth, you sorry, Tim. Like everywhere we went, like there were people behind people. It was like a queue. Like we had an excellent time. And if you ever want to feel like a real celebrity for a brief moment in your life, I just walk behind Brian Dunseth at MLS All-Star Game in a town he's lived in. It was super, super fun. But yeah, briefly, the stadium is absolutely fantastic. And I've not been to all the stadiums, obviously. I think been to 5 of the current active MLS stadiums and a few other kind of American sports stadiums. But what's great about it is the smokestack thing outside is brilliantly kind of individualistic, and they didn't do it in the game, I don't think, for All-Star, but they light the smoke at the top of the stack to let people know around the city where everything's quite level. There's not many skyscrapers or whatever. Oh, you see the smoke. The game's about to kick off.
Yeah.
It felt a lot more of a soccer town than DC last year for obvious reasons, but crew symbols are up everywhere and people on the streets were wearing it. And we had to get to the stadium, so I couldn't do the full walk thing, but I did go when I got dinner into a little bar where there was like a few people setting up to do the walk, which is like just under a mile, the march to the match bit, which was fantastic. The stadium is great. Love the terracing behind the goal. It was great to be able to stand there for a bit of some of the game, even though it wasn't a crew game. And yeah, just a brilliant, like, we're going to get to it later. I do want to talk about it. And maybe we'll segue into it now, in fact. You know, playing football, and you always say this, at a football-specific venue, as opposed to like watching them play at Yankee Stadium, for obvious reasons. You go want to get butts on seats and make some money, so I get it all. But seeing it played at a proper stadium built for it, and again, I go to a Meccano weird bowl of a stadium a lot, and there's good elements and bad elements to that. But that was fantastic, and it just made me think, like, is it not better to play games like that in proper football venues, sell it out, and make it feel like, yeah, this feels right? We're doing football properly in America, as opposed to, I don't want to be critical because we spoke to him a bit and I understand why they've done it, but the Crystal Palace, West Ham, Wolves tour out in Florida, the kind of California tour they're doing, California, Florida tour. But what's the phrase they're using? It's like Sun Belt tour, whatever it is. I forget what it is.
I don't know, whatever.
Sunshine State tour. That I think it must be what it is. Anyway, I watched a bit of that game when I got back. And our friend Rodney Marsh went. I've not spoken to him about it since. I'd be interested to see what he thinks. But the venue in Jacksonville was what, 70,000 or something? Like, it's massive. Like,
massive
huge venue.
Yeah.
And they've done about 20,000 tickets. And for West Ham against Wolverhampton Wanderers in a friendly in like what looks like monsoon season, and a game that was delayed 2.5 hours, that's actually pretty good. Like, it's pretty good. They got to do some local media, meet local fans. A friend of mine who runs a West Ham American podcast got to meet a bunch of players, Bradley, and he's got photos of him with Mark Noble and who else played? Mikel Antonio, whatever. Some of the older players, the younger players, the current players, all of it. Fantastic for him and for them. So that's a great thing. Then you watch the game and you're a bit like, it's all empty seats. If they'd have played that game in a proper soccer-specific venue, 20,000 fans or less, Crew's 19,000. But it almost felt like it was a failure. But actually, it's not a failure to get that many fans to watch those two teams in this particular scenario. So I just wonder, in this growth of the American tour, and look, you can sell out Arsenal, Liverpool at Jet Stadium, right? Of course you can. But maybe it's more difficult to sell Arsenal Wolves. It's not the same, but it's not nothing. Why don't they look for smaller venues and then try and grow into those bigger venues? Like, you want to get to Carnegie Hall, you got to practice, right? You don't just turn up there and you headline it. It's weird to me.
Yeah, it's the promoters, right? The promoters first and foremost. So what's the accessibility? Because I would argue playing Inter Miami, Drive Pink Stadium, or playing where Orlando City plays, those are perfect venues. But again, the organizers are going to think grander, they're going to think bigger, and probably the renting cost for the facilities out of season are going to be similar to what they would, I would assume. So in Orlando, they're going to say Camping World, if we can get 25,000, that's 5,000 more than we'll get at Orlando City Stadium. So I can understand the math behind it, but yeah, the visuals. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, it's going to be painfully oppressive heat that you're dealing with as a player coming over from England. I mean, you're having a moan about how hot it is back in England and what it's like 75 today.
Very hot.
You were complaining about having air conditioning in Columbus because the voice, I can't hit my highs.
It does affect my throat, and it's damaging for the environment. There are just places in America that aren't fit for human habitation. That's, that's the way it is.
So you say. But listen, I get it, but it's the visual thing. I mean, it's the same thing that the US dealt with, or excuse me, the MLS teams dealt with previously to participating in the League's Cup. And by the way, Columbus gets that friendly against Aston Villa because they win MLS Cup final. They have automatic entrance to the round of 32, so they bypass the group stage. So they've got 10 days, and they obviously want to keep their momentum, and they absolutely smashed Aston Villa 4-1. So yeah, I mean, listen, the reality is a couple things. Number one, None of these teams get to complain March and April, February, March,
Ugh,
April about the schedule congestion
they will.
because you fucking flew to California. Sorry, Tim. Secondly, you know, Palace and these teams, Wolves, West Ham, they're supported here in the United States, but they're not massively supported here in the
Yeah.
United States. So this is
And
a,
that's why won't they accept that though? Like, I'm sure it's money,
well,
right? It's going to be money,
yeah,
but like,
100%, but it's
if
branding.
you were trying to build your brand in America, which all these clubs are trying to do in all sorts of countries around the world,
Yeah.
I want to be showing people when I say, right, we're going to come again next year, a full house of people.
Mm.
And like our friend Jack Collison posted a photograph of him being inside the stadium. And again, he's like, this is great. And I'm sure it was great. And I'm sure there's loads of positives from it. We
Yeah.
spoke to Steve Ball, the former Wolves striker, on Monday. And there's no doubt they've had a good time over here, and it's great to be here, and all that sort of stuff. And
Yeah.
meeting fans from all over America that travel to Florida to watch the game. That's great. But then everyone who doesn't give a sorry, Tim, they'll be a bit like, well, nobody went. This was a waste of time.
It's
Why open
perception.
yourself up to that?
Yeah, it certainly is a perception. From a player standpoint, when you walk into Jacksonville Jaguars Stadium, you're going to be like, oh my God, I'm in an NFL stadium. So that, it's going to be an experience for them as well. Yeah, listen, it's the same perception issues that MLS was dealing with when they'd play, when I called an LA Galaxy game against Barcelona. First half, it's 1-1. Second half, Bruce Arena at the time was worried about the game at the weekend because they're in the midst of the smack dab of their season and they're trying to fight for first place. And he brings all the bench warmers, and it ended up like 8-1 when it was all said and done. So it doesn't benefit
Looks bad.
Barcelona. It certainly looks terrible for LA Galaxy at the time. So yeah, I don't think there's an easy solution for any of this, but I do agree with you. If you can fill out the smaller venues, 20,000 people at Subaru Park, where Philadelphia Union plays, looks drastically different than 20,000 people
Yeah.
in Jacksonville. So yeah, it's always going to be a perception issue, but at the end of the day, all of these kind of mid-table teams are going to look to continue to brand their clubs and recognizing that
Yeah.
there's a lot of credit cards here in the United States.
If you want to sell 90,000 tickets somewhere not in your home country or at your home ground, I think you've got to have won the league a few times. And if you haven't, then, maybe cut that cloth accordingly. But there we go. That's the US tour. Some positives, some negatives. It is preseason, and the performances maybe reflected that. I wanted to ask you about the Olympics before we're out of time today. That's the only time I'll say the Olympics after that second time. You're going to bleep them out probably because we're kind of banned from saying the O word if you're trying to promote something because the people who run that particular competition are a bit litigious. So we don't want to get sued. We don't get any money out of this program. And so I've got no money to give you. So I've been calling it the Dionysus Games after the incredible opening ceremony, which, was probably the only opening ceremony ever people could really rub one out to, which I think is great. If it's your thing, God bless you. But you could have one of those. Yeah, I can't say that, Tim, but absolutely. But like Dionysus featured heavily in that thing people confused for the Last Supper. The games, if you don't know, are something created after someone run once from Marathon to Athens. And the games spring up from that. But at the Dionysus Games, the Americans take it very, very seriously. I mean, the women are amongst the favourites, them and Spain, probably 1 and 2. The Australia game is on the Wednesday as we record. We're counting down as we speak to the men in action against Guinea in a game they'll probably win. I mean, tell us a bit about the American team, men and women, and what it would mean. Because I think I don't quite get this in the UK, and many of our listeners might not, because we don't put a team into the football for various 500-year-old political reasons.
Yeah, not good enough.
I mean, we'd probably win it.
Yeah.
Probably win it. Once every 10 years,
allegedly
we'd
it's
win
coming home. Yeah, like
once
it's
every
coming
10
home.
years, it would come to one of the 4 homes of the United Kingdom, probably.
Yeah.
But anyway, we don't put a team in, so we don't really get it to the same degree. But for you guys, the soccer, it's a huge thing, especially for the women.
Yeah, let's start with the women. Obviously, with Emma Hayes and the success that she had at Chelsea Football Club on the women's side, and just the serial winner coming over in a very short amount of time, the game looks completely different. The tactics, the shape, the identity, how much fun they seem to be having, and how dominant they've been early in this tournament. So the expectations are, I would say, much higher than maybe they were a couple of weeks ago, when we didn't really know how much time that she was going to have with this group and how quickly they were going to adapt with her style of football. Instantaneous, immediate. We've seen kind of the adjustment. So they've I think maybe the baseline expectation for like, oh yeah, no, they have a chance to like, oh my God, they've really got a chance, has raised significantly. For Marko Mitrovic is on the men's side, listen, there's questions about the roster coming in. For 60 minutes against Thierry Henry's France, which was going to be the most difficult test possibly to start. They were a pretty good team. They had their chances. They should have finished off chances. And when they hit the post and a couple of big saves, all of a sudden, those chances that they missed come back to haunt them. Final 30 minutes, France, they just pulled away from the United States and thoroughly enjoyed and deserved that win. So the response was going to be immediate. Like, I think once you lost that game and you gave up 3 goals, you're thinking about goal differential in the group stage. All of a sudden, you needed a knockout round type of response. They got that at half. I turned the game off at halftime. That's how good they were. I mean, it was 3-0. They were cruise control. There's nothing else that was going to happen. They end up winning 4-1, and now they play a Guinea team that Naby Keita is headlining that group. They are a team that plays primarily their football in France and in Europe. They only lost to France 1-0. So this is not, I think it's way more difficult than people are giving them credit for. So how did they navigate that? And by the way, once you end up second place, if you end up second place, you're rewarded with most likely facing Argentina in the next round. So there's no easy pathway when it comes to this. And understanding, having been a part of the Olympics in 2000 against that guy, Bam Bam Zamorano, and Chile, understanding what kind of this monumental moment could look like, it's life-changing. For me, I hit the crossbar and hit the post off a corner, and they went down and got a penalty and scored, and we chased the game, ended up giving a second one up, and we ended up losing 2-0. So it was like this close from having a bronze medal. And by the way, not for nothing, we didn't qualify for 2004. 2008, we qualified. That was Josie, Michael Bradley, Brad Guzan, that group. Didn't get to the quarterfinal stage, and then haven't qualified since. So this is a big moment, because I think people forget you've got the under-17 World Cup, the under-20 World Cup. This is the under-23 World Cup, and this is an important phase for this group of players, because we need them to succeed to then apply more pressure to what was Greg Berhalter's first team. And that's the group we saw fail at Copa America. So it's an important moment. And hopefully this group of players, despite my own kind of issues with the roster and who's not there, I wish them the best, because it's a great opportunity to. And the weird thing is, we talk about tournaments. Tournaments is just about momentum. And when you have self-belief and you have momentum, crazy stuff can happen. Except if you're English, because it's not coming home.
Lawyers, if you are listening, you may have thought you heard the O word there in what Dunny said. You actually heard Dionysus, okay? Dionysus. That's what you heard. Dionysus.
Dionysus.
Look it up. 2000. Dionysus. 2,000 years ago, if not more. Let's get to heroes and villains. We'll pick out a hero and a villain of the last few days from the world of football. And I'll start with what sounds like a villain, but it is indeed a hero. I'm going with Jason Malombi of West Bromwich Albion. Why, I hear you ask? Well, West Bromwich Albion of the Championship were playing a friendly against Mallorca in the last few days. And one thing about football that it does annoy me is that any sort of confrontation now, you have to really kind of hold yourself back, be a bit snide, be a bit Dunsethery about it all. And when two players kind of rub heads together and start pushing, one of them has to pretend they got headbutted. If a player accidentally gets an elbow in the face, they kind of have to go down like it was a swung in their face situation, all that sort of stuff. And I've been kind of keen on bringing back a kind of ice hockey rule to football, or bringing in an ice hockey rule to football, which is you get 30 seconds after an altercation to start windmilling in. Franny Lee style, 1970s Leeds, right? Jason Malumbi had an altercation with Mallorca's Samu Costa. And Samu Costa thought this was a league game situation. I went up to Malumbi and started giving him a bit of grief after a tackle that went in. Malumbi was a bit like, is this a league game? No. Can I get some serious punishment for this? I don't think so. I don't care for this guy. Hooked him in the face.
Wow.
Proper right hand hook on the jaw. Now, again, Violence is never the answer, kids. But if you're all on board with it, a little right hook never hurt anyone who deserved it. I just loved it. I thought it was good. Like, I'm so bored of these fake rows footballers have,
Yeah.
like whapping out the old Johnson and saying who's bigger without really showing us the good stuff. Like, give us 20 seconds of them being able to, it's a game for the men at least, full of testosterone, right? So let's let them unleash it every now and then. All this grabbing each other's shirt and grabbing them by the neck and
Handbags
all
at
this
12
handbag
paces.
stuff.
Yeah.
They'd love to throw a right hook every now and
Yeah.
then, some of these guys.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, I'm not even a fan of boxing. I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah. My hero is going to be Tom Rennie. And why?
Stop being so nice. Why are you being so nice to me?
I didn't know that Tom Rennie was an athlete. I mean, I knew Tom was athletic. Let's not bury the lead. You're athletic, but American athletic. This isn't foot-eye coordination. This is hand-eye coordination. And you hit the marks that I expected on a couple things. I thought football was going to be difficult for you. I thought basketball was going to be difficult for you. You came through pretty unscathed, but the baseball, my man, you did well. We started from T-ball to underhand pitch to 60 miles an hour to 90 miles an hour, and then back on the baseball field, you got a hold of a couple. You actually hit 2 to the outfield in your like 10 to 15 swings that then had you sweating through your nipples because you hadn't swung a bat that hard, maybe ever.
It was exhausting.
So my hero is going to be the performance that Rennie put in.
Oh.
And it wasn't because my bar of expectation was that low, but it was pretty low.
What about when we were able to do Wednesday's 3-hour live show, having got to bed at 4, got up again at 7 to do a 3-hour show from 8 to 11? In many ways, we're both heroes for achieving that.
I think we walked in the door probably between 2:30 and 3. And it was to the point where I left you. And you and Tim stopped to get a piece of pizza on the walk back, just for that slight sobering up ability before we came on air. And by the way, I saw Tom's process. Tom's process is this: sits on the edge of the couch, leans over, puts his elbows in between his knees, puts his hands in his head for a minute, and he goes, "Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome in, everybody, to Sirius XM." And I was like, holy shit. Sorry, Tim. Like, to see you kind of like just turn it on when we weren't touch and go like heaving, but we were like, oh, I don't know if it was good or bad that Tom Rennie just downed 2 pieces of avocado toast right before we went upstairs to sit on Tim's dodgy JD Vance couch on the 4th floor with some scotch tape on top of it. It was it was a moment. So yeah, you're my hero for that one.
Thanks, buddy. Villain wise, I have a few this week, and I was going to say part of that evening and why we had to get that 3 a.m. pizza was America does not cater for vegetarians. And we went to a dinner where they were like, "What do you want for dinner?" And I was like, "What's the vegetarian option?" And she was like, "What?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Do you not eat?" She said, "Do you not eat fish?" And I was like, "No, that's still a living thing. I don't eat these things."
That's usually our vegetarian option is a fish, yeah.
And so what she did basically, the waitress, was take the salmon off the salmon dish and just give me rice and sauce. So I was starving,
which was really good.
Yeah. I suppose if you had the main part of the dish, it was good. But my villain is Gareth Southgate. And I'm not letting it go.
Now? He's gone.
I know he's gone, but I was reading Jack Grealish today while City are on their American tour. And Grealish was talking about the fact that he could have offered something to England during the European Championship. And he said, I felt I should have been in the squad. And I was absolutely devastated not to be in the squad. And we could have an argument about whether he played, whether he was good enough, and all that sort of stuff. But England had no left side for the entirety of this tournament. And whether we think Grealish is good or not, he plays on the left wing.
What about Anthony Gordon? You got to play the guy.
He clearly doesn't like Anthony Gordon and was never going to play him. He actually probably would have bought Grealish off the bench because he knows him, right? So I kind of feel for Grealish. I can imagine Grealish sitting there in a, very expensive hotel with his, gorgeous fiance and his millions of pounds. So I'm not feeling that sorry for him. But like, he'd have gone like, could I not have offered something on the left wing against Spain for the last half an hour? So my villain is Gareth Southgate for not, if you weren't going to play the people you brought, bring somebody else who you did play previously. So
see, I would disagree with you. I actually would have said Marcus Rashford instead of Jack Grealish, because at least Rashford played this season. But by the way,
but he hasn't verbalized the fact that that he should have been there.
I should have been there.
He hasn't verbalized it yet.
I should have been there. By the way, did you see the Shrek donkey made fun of him to his face?
No? Who? Grealish?
Yeah. Grealish was there, and you had Fiona, and you had Donkey from Shrek, and Donkey was literally taking the piss out of Jack Grealish to his face, to the point where Grealish like looks at the camera like, "The fuck is this?" Sorry, Tim. Like, what? Why is this guy making fun of me? Like, what? What? Like, I came here for an enjoyable moment. But you had like the little snarky donkey, like whoever's voicing him from behind. So he made it personal. Speaking of villains, I'm also gonna choose Tom Rennie, because Tom Rennie at a dinner was using English slang that is unacceptable in America. Unacceptable. And not only did he use the slang once, but he used it multiple times afterwards to justify why in America we should be able to use this slang word, which I'm not going to say because it's an unacceptable word here in the United States. But you at the dinner doubled, tripled, quadrupled, and kept going on because you're like, no, it's a totally acceptable word. And we're like, nope. Cut your losses, bro.
I think you'll find it is a totally acceptable word for anyone living in this country. So I think it's...
Don't say it. Just don't let them guess. Just let them guess what word you're using.
I think I slipped in a very good clue there. But anyway, I probably won't use it again next time in America. But I always find it weird when you lot say like and they're banned. The first one's definitely banned. So I don't know.
Really?
Right. Oh, no, wait, the second one. Anyway. That's a weird way to end the program, but end the program we shall. This has been the Week in the Tackle podcast. That is Brian Dunny Dunseth. I'm Tom Rennie. Tim Horsey produced the program. Sorry, Tim. We'll see you next time.
Sorry, Tim.